What's up, everybody? You are watching Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting news on Alabama Football YouTube. Happy draft day, everybody. It is draft day 2022, first round draft day, at least here as the NFL draft does get underway tonight. Trey Hannity joined, as always, by Andrew Bone, 18-year-plus veteran in the industry, guys, best-selling author. You can find him on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone. As we get into the show tonight, guys, please hit that like button for me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you're going to want to do that. Hit that bell at the top of the page so you can get notified when we post videos just like this and other videos breaking down the draft and, of course, the rest of everything going on in Alabama football. But we're going to talk about the draft tonight, of course. But before we do that, we got to get into the recruiting news a little bit. I just, want to know how your week is doing, to this point, and your general thoughts, I guess, as draft day is upon us and, we get further into the spring, post-spring practice.
Yeah, it's been a difficult week. I mean, it's been one of those weeks where I don't normally take much time off. If I do, it's usually a day or I might take the weekend off, but it's been a little rough this week, under the weather. Got sick on Sunday, and I was kind of out of commission for a couple of days, and it hit my wife, and she was sick. So then my child got sick. Everybody in our household was sick this week, so it's been a process. But hey, we're getting back to normal. My wife and I are actually pretty good now, and my son, he's battling, but he's not in the hospital or anything. I don't want to scare anybody, but he's had some upper respiratory issues, had some double ear infection this week. I mean, it's just some crap that he's having to deal with, which I know he's been struggling sleeping at night. But hey, last night, best night of the week for him, slept all night long. So I think we're coming around.
It's good to hear. I wish the quickest recovery to you and the rest of your family, of course. That time of the year, we got all kinds of allergies going around. Hopefully, you guys are all well by the end of this week, at least here. And I know, like you said, you're one of the hardest working in the industry, if not the hardest working. So, guys, when you see Bone taking days off, it's something serious. So please get well soon here, Bone. But, as we kind of get into the recruiting side of things tonight, talk about a couple of 5-stars that have visits scheduled here in the rest of the spring. I know you've had the chance to talk to Brandon Ennis, the wide receiver out of South Florida. And I know that a linebacker out of Texas, Anthony Hill, has a visit scheduled as well. Talk about these two, where Alabama's push is at this point. I know it's become pretty strong now.
Yeah, as we kind of get into June, we're going to start seeing a lot of official visits. A lot of top kids are going to, try to take their visits during the summer. You look at Alabama's commitment list right now, only 3 commitments, but, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think Alabama wants to get a lot of these kids on campus this summer, whether that's for an official visit or for a evaluation. Obviously they're out on the road this spring evaluating a lot of guys, hoping a lot of these guys come in for camps. But you're going to see a lot of kids take official visits. We really saw that last summer. We saw that last summer more than any other time in the history of recruiting it, with the NCAA allowing recruits to start taking these summer official visits instead of having to wait until the fall. So a lot of kids are taking these officials during the summer, enjoying it. And, we're starting to see a lot more commitments happen, obviously, during the summer as well. But we did see 2 5-star recruits set up official visits to Alabama for this summer in June. The first, Brandon Ennis, on June the 3rd through the 5th. Now, this is going to be his first visit to Alabama, which is kind of surprising because Alabama's been on his short list for a very long time, for almost 2 years. He committed to Oklahoma last August, but even back then, Alabama was in that top 3 for him before he made that decision. So it's a little surprising that he still hadn't made a trip to Alabama. He had a couple trips planned this spring, had to cancel both of them. So hopefully he's not going to cancel the official visit. You usually don't cancel those officials once you get those scheduled. But I certainly think that he's going to make that trip, and I know he's excited about it. I had a chance to talk to Brandon the other day. Now, this is the number 1 wide receiver in the country, 5-star recruit out of American Heritage down in South Florida, Plantation, Florida. Same high school that has produced a few Alabama guys. Well, at least one Alabama guy and one Alabama signee, Patrick Surtain II, and also you've got Earl Little Jr. coming in here this summer. So that school's been pretty kind to Alabama, and I'm sure Alabama's hoping they'll do the same this upcoming year. But this is a big target for the Crimson Tide. And he told me, he said, over the course of the last few weeks, he's really could tell a difference in Alabama's recruiting efforts in him. They're talking to him every single week, talking to the Travaris Robinson, talking to the wide receivers coach, Holman Wiggins. Great relationship with all the coaches there. And also had a great conversation with Nick Saban a couple weeks ago, just about what he can bring to the table. He actually compared him, didn't compare him to John Mechie, but told him he'd be doing a kind of a similar role as John Mechie in the Tides offense. And he liked hearing that. He's a big fan of John Mechie, obviously a big fan of a lot of Alabama wide receivers that have come through the years. And definitely definitely going to be watching the NFL draft tonight to see where JMO ends up going, because we know he's going to be a first rounder this evening. But Anthony Hill, 5-star linebacker, best linebacker in the country. Big to get him back on campus. He visited last year, so this is big to get him back into Tuscaloosa. He was at the spring game. He didn't make a trip during the summer, but was at the spring game. So he's got a lot of interest in Alabama, but it's been a while since he's been back to Tuscaloosa. So getting him back on campus is going to be huge. He's going to visit, I believe, on June the 10th through the 12th, making his trip to Alabama. Right now, I would say Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Those are kind of the schools that are in the forefront for him right now. So getting him back on campus and then kind of seeing where things are after that visit, that's going to be important. So we'll see how the visit goes. But in terms of those two guys, I would say Alabama's got a little bit better chance with Brandon Ennis. Just the fact that he has Alabama in that top group and hasn't visited yet, this could potentially push them over the top with the visit coming up here in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. Hadn't gotten to see Anthony Hill, too much quite yet, but from what I've seen in Brandon Ennis, absolutely a stud out of South Florida there. Going to be fun to follow those. Always exciting when we see these official visits scheduled. Hope to see more of those now. Down the line into the summer, hopefully a busy summer yet again here. A couple of guys, though, Alabama, only 3 commitments to this point, and I know a couple of them have you a little bit worried right now. Some visits elsewhere. Talk about Elliott Washington. Took a trip to Michigan State, as well as Jaleel Hurley made the trip over to the Plains to visit the Auburn Tigers there. How should Alabama fans feel about these two? Do you see them backing their commitment? Is this something to be worried about at this point?
Well, I think it's something to watch. Anytime a recruit that's committed somewhere takes a visit elsewhere, you always have to watch them pretty closely and see what happens. It's not necessarily the days leading up, but the days after. But you have to watch and see, are they going to return to that school for an official visit? Do they go to that school's camp? Do they go to any events at those schools, like a cookout or anything like that? So, that's something that we're going to continue to watch pretty closely. Now, Elliott Washington, came out and said that he's still solid with his commitment to Alabama. I think there's been a lot of attention on him, going on that Michigan State visit. There was some predictions that he was going to flip, within a few days. Never happened. And then came out and said, "Hey, I'm solid." I think anytime a kid takes an official visit, or not an official visit, but an unofficial visit, or it can be an official visit to a school, everyone's going to automatically assume that kid's flipping, or that kid has high interest in this other school. And in a lot of cases they do, but it doesn't always mean that they're going to flip. They're just enjoying the process. They're going on these trips. They're wanting to meet these coaching staffs who've been recruiting them for a while, and just check out the program. Maybe it's a better fit for them. Who knows? That's why they want to go on these trips and see it for themselves. But at the same time, you still have Alabama recruiting you. You're still committed to Alabama. You're still going to visit Alabama again and again. So this is kind of a long process. We'll see, after they take their official visits, if, things still look a little dicey, then maybe we'll say that they're going to flip. But as of right now, I think Elliott Washington, remains committed to Alabama. Now, in terms of Jaleel Hurley, there's been a lot of speculation that he might flip to Auburn after taking a visit down to the Plains this past weekend. They did post a tweet saying no interviews. I'm sure, what we've seen with Auburn, if you follow Auburn recruiting much, they do allow reporters to come out and interview kids, after these visits. So they're on campus, able to interview them. Not able to do that at Alabama. I wish you could do that, but they don't. The Alabama coaching staff would have a pretty big fit if they saw a bunch of reporters waiting outside the Mount Moore Athletic Facility, ready to interview every top kid that walked out of the building. some schools you're able to do that a little bit easier. That's at Auburn. So I don't think he was able to. I think he got around those guys when he was at Auburn, and then tweeted that he didn't want to do any interviews about the visit. But obviously, there's some interest there. It's something that we're going to continue to watch pretty closely. As of right now, still committed to Alabama, and I'm sure Alabama's continuing to work there. He was one of the first stops for Alabama last week when they went on the road recruiting. So obviously they're not trying to cut bait with him at all. It's not one of those situations where Auburn's recruiting him. Hey, okay, go there. We'll go get somebody else. Alabama loves this kid. They want to keep him on board. Obviously, there's a lot of other defensive backs that are out there that they're going to continue to recruit. I feel like this is going to be a great defensive back class for Alabama because there's so many top defensive backs throughout the country. It's a very deep class for defensive backs. Everybody's kind of focused in on these top guys. You look at Rivals or whatever site you may look at. You say, okay, here are the top 5 defensive backs in the country. Let's go after those guys only. Trust me, there's about 25 guys out there that Alabama likes that they're recruiting. Now, they may not all be that top tier guy, but they're good enough. They're good enough to play at Alabama. So I think Alabama, in the end of the day, they're going to be fine at the defensive back position. And you always got to remember, you strike out on a defensive back, guess what? There's a transfer portal DB that's usually available that you can go after, and that's what Alabama did this past year when they missed out on Damani Jackson. They were able to get Elias Ricks from the transfer portal. So got to keep in mind that you can go after the transfer portal guys as well. And that's certainly another recruiting tool. But we'll keep our eyes open on Jahil Hurley, Elliott Washington over the course of the next few months, see if anything were to happen. But as of right now, both still committed to the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, no worry, too much worry quite yet. No need to worry too much at this point. Still part of this commitment group, and would be 2 excellent DBs to get in this class. But like you said, Alabama has had quite the amount of success in the transfer portal. So if they're not able to hold on to these guys, I'm sure they're going to find some other options out there as well. One guy though that may not be replaceable if he does decide to commit with the Crimson Tide. Number 1 outside linebacker in the country, Malik Bryant. This is a guy we talked about a few weeks ago when doing our big board, and this is a guy that now will project his top 6 this upcoming Sunday. I know you expect Alabama to be there, but do you see Alabama being in the driver's seat when this top 6 comes out throughout the rest of his recruitment?
I think so. I think Alabama is in the lead at this point with Malik Bryant out of Jones High School in Orlando. I played his junior season at IMG Academy, then transferred back home. But as of right now, I do think Alabama's in the driver's seat. Obviously, he's going to take his official visits during the summer, all of them probably in the month of June, then make that commitment on July the 23rd. Florida, Miami, Georgia, Oklahoma. These are all schools that he has high interest in. But I do think that Alabama has the lead going into at least May. I think they've got the lead. So we'll see, kind of what happens over the course of these next 2 months. But I certainly expect him to take an official visit to Alabama sometime in June.
Would be an excellent, addition to this class. Of course, the number 1 outside linebacker in the country. Guys, get in the comments. Let me know what you think about Malik Bryant. A lot of the other guys we've had the chance to talk about tonight. Some really exciting recruits in this class. Alabama with 3 commitments to this point already as well. So let me know what you think about those guys that have already made their commitment with the Crimson Tide. We know spring evaluations continue to go on. Throughout these next few weeks as well. And this week, Alabama had the chance to see 5-star offensive lineman Caden Proctor. So we talk about some other recruits that they are going to have the chance to visit with. Who do you think that's going to be? Who will they get to see in person, at least, within this upcoming week?
Well, they've seen a lot of top kids this week. I mean, the thing about the spring evaluations is you're going out, you're getting a chance to, evaluate a lot of your top guys. You're getting a chance to see a lot of your top guys. I think with a guy like Caden Proctor or a Brandon Ennis or a Cormani McLean or Richard Young, these top end guys that you've been recruiting for a long time, that you don't necessarily have to go out to a spring practice in White Sim, but being out there at practice and seeing them compete and seeing them work out, that's something that, recruits like. They like to see these different coaches, at their practices and coming by their school. But as far as Alabama, they're going out and they're doing this, but they're also going out and seeing guys that we're not talking about yet, that might be 3 stars or they might be committed somewhere else that nobody's talking about. Jackson McGowan, who is a 3-star Cincinnati commitment out of Miamisburg, Ohio. He got visited by Alabama this week. So they're not just going out and seeing, just the top kids that we know about. They're going out and seeing just so many different kids in so many different regions of the country, evaluating, trying to get a lot of these kids on campus this spring for summer camp. Because you go out, let's say you're, Alabama offensive line coach Eric Wolford, or you're, Pete Golding. You're going out to a high school and seeing a kid for the very first time that you fall in love with, that you think, man, this guy's good enough to play at Alabama. But guess what? At the end of the day, Nick Saban has to sign off on that guy. And Nick Saban wants to see that guy in person. So they're out there evaluating guys, offering them all these offers that you see, because we're seeing, 8, 9, 10 offers that go out every single week. A lot of these offers are, hey, you got an offer, but you still need to come to camp. You still have to show out in front of Nick Saban. You got to show him what you just showed me for that offer to become committable. So a lot of these offers that you see going out right now, they're non-committable until you come to camp and participate. But they're going out. They're seeing a lot of top guys right now. Obviously, we talked about Caden Proctor. They went and saw Cormani McClain. Coach Coleman Hutzler was up in northwest part of the country yesterday, seeing Jaden Wayne, the 5-star defensive end, tight end. They're all over the country seeing a lot of top guys. Bill O'Brien was in the Northeast this week. He went and saw Ola Salinen, the 4-star offensive lineman out of Connecticut. Saw Ronan Hannafin, the 4-star athlete right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So Crimson Tide coaches are all over the country right now, recruiting in just about every single area. They're going to continue to do that. I talked to several guys this week, especially guys in Texas, who said that they expect Alabama to come and see them next week. And a lot of these guys haven't started spring practice yet, so coaches are waiting until they begin their spring practice. Brandon Ennis, we talked about earlier, 5-star wide receiver. He expects to see Travaris Robinson and Holman Wiggins at his practice on Friday. So they're all over the country right now. Not a lot of time spending in Tuscaloosa, unless they're going by and seeing Wilkin Formby over at Northridge High School, but which Bill O'Brien did last week. But there's really kind of throughout the entire country trying to hit up every single kid they can possibly see, but not just the top end guys, the guys that a lot of people don't even know about yet.
Alabama is truly everywhere. And guys, if you haven't had the chance to check it out yet, Bone did a tremendous job of breaking down each coach's responsibilities, their areas in recruiting. Did that last week. So just scroll down a little bit on our YouTube page and you can find that video, as well as a lot of videos talking about the NFL draft leading up to this day, these next few days here as it begins later tonight. We cover this from a team perspective and, where we see these guys going, what it means for their careers. But I want to take a step back and hear some of your stories about what these guys were like during the recruitment process. Kind of just want to go down the list. I think Evan Neal would be a good way to start it tonight, as we kind of talk about some of the guys that we see getting drafted earlier on, or maybe the guys that we could see getting drafted in the first round tonight at least. But, I'm sure you have some wild stories and just kind of the memories from these recruitments. If you want to take it away with Evan Neal.
Evan Neal actually committed to Alabama. A lot of people probably forgot about this, but he committed to Alabama after his freshman season at Jobe High School and ended up decommitting from Alabama after his sophomore year. He gained a lot of weight. I think he got up. I don't want to say he got to 400, but he got close. And he ends up transferring to IMG Academy. When he transferred to IMG Academy, really working on his body, working on his nutrition. Obviously, we see what Evan Neal looks like now, obviously getting to Alabama, but it really started, his transition really started at IMG Academy. And I remember looking at him as a senior. I got a call from one of the IMG coaches when they were playing Hoover High School in Hoover. Evan Neal and Trey Sanders, both playing together at IMG, they would not do any interviews during their senior season. You just couldn't, unless you got them in person. And fortunately, in Birmingham, I was able to drive over to the Winfrey Hotel, I guess the Sheraton Hotel, and interview both of these guys. And certainly felt like at the time both of those guys were going to end up at Alabama. And Trey Sanders was another former Alabama commitment who recommitted to Alabama on signing day. But I remember the night before the early signing period, and I always felt like it was Alabama for Evan Neal. I didn't think that really any other schools were in it. Georgia was in it, Oklahoma, Miami. Those were all schools that he took official visits to. There was some talk that maybe he stayed in Florida and went to Miami, but nobody was really buying that. The night before signing day, I was told, watch out for Georgia, because they had made a really strong push for him, and they were really coming on strong. I would have been surprised if he would have gone to Georgia, but there was a lot of talk the night before that Georgia was really in it and could steal him at the last minute from Alabama. But then that morning, I'd heard from a pretty good source that it was Alabama, and then he announced. So obviously, he had a great career in Tuscaloosa, and we'll see what he ends up doing tonight in the draft.
Really, could go in the top 3 here. Would love to see him maybe even go number 1 overall. That might be ambitious, but Evan Neal, all the potential in the world, and some fun stories there with his recruiting as well. Jameson Williams, a guy, wasn't necessarily thinking about Alabama during his high school recruitment process. A guy that ends up with Alabama and had to go through that process in the transfer portal. Talk about what you remember from him, even just this past summer.
Well, he actually had a high interest in Alabama coming out of high school. Visited Tuscaloosa back in June, but before his senior year. There was a lot of interest there. His dad really liked Alabama a lot. I think his dad was pushing Alabama, maybe a little bit more than JMO wanted to go there at the time. Even though he liked Alabama, he was feeling Ohio State a little bit more, and he visited Oregon, visited some other schools, but in the end, ends up picking Ohio State. I remember interviewing him at the Rivals Camp, 5-star challenge his senior season, and just thinking, man, this is a really quiet kid. He didn't really talk a lot, very reserved. But man, when the lights were on, he could get it. I mean, he reminded me. I don't want to say he reminded me of Devontae Smith, because they're a little bit different, but the way, just they kind of held themselves in terms of, they were just quiet assassins is what I like to call them. I mean, they were just, they didn't really talk a lot. They they kind of just went to work. I mean, Jerry Jeudy was kind of the same way. Calvin Ridley was a little bit more of a talker, but these Alabama guys who come through the Alabama program, they just kind of go out there and get their business done. There's not a lot of talk. You might see it from a few guys, but most of them are pretty quiet, and then they go out there and do work. So JMO was he was a special player coming out of high school, and obviously a special player coming out of college at Alabama.
What about his partner in crime there in that receiving corps this past year, John Mechie, guy that had a roller coaster ride at Alabama, but an outstanding career in his time there?
Yeah, I mean, this was a kid that I call him a kid. Yeah, I guess a kid at the time. He was from Canada and ended up moving over to this private school in New Jersey. He ended up narrowing it down to Alabama and Penn State. Had a really good relationship with Josh Gaddis, Michael Oxley at Alabama. But really, Coach Gaddis was really the one who made this really strong push for him. Really liked him a lot. Thought he was one of the top end guys in the country. And I think at the time, it wasn't ranked as high. There was a lot of other guys that were ranked higher than him. I remember on the message boards, Alabama fans wondering, well, who is this guy? Why are they going after this guy? And I said, well, just wait. He seems like a pretty special player, unique player, and definitely somebody that Alabama wanted. There was a connection at Penn State. I think a guy that he knew from Canada was at Penn State. He didn't know really anybody at all at Alabama, except for the coaches that he had met. Just once, but obviously they did enough to win over his recruitment, and obviously the development at the position. Now, Penn State, they developed some great wide receivers too, but I think Alabama's recent success and the amount of players that they've had recent success with, it really helped win John Mechie over. But great career at Alabama, better than what I think anybody could have ever imagined, and hope to see him have a tremendous success in the NFL, and hope to see him go early. I think definitely a lot of talk that he might be going in the second round, which is tremendous. I think maybe would have gone in the first round without that injury, but I think going into the second round, going in the first or second round or third, I mean, that's obviously outstanding.
It's outstanding. The money is outstanding. I know any opportunity he's going to take advantage of. Like you said, from Canada, different type of recruit, but came down south to play for the Crimson Tide and had an amazing career. As we talk about a guy, Christian Harris, on the other side of the football, a guy that kind of had to be thrown into the fire right away at his time at Alabama, but developed in that role and really became a steady force there in the middle. Talk about his recruitment process a little bit more and, kind of how you've seen him grow in this time.
The first time I ever watched Christian Harris in a high school football camp, he was working out at wide receiver. I mean, this was one of the best high school athletes in the country. Nobody was really sure, exactly which position he was going to play in college. I think it was pretty evident that he was going to end up being a linebacker if he went to Alabama. Some schools talked to him about playing safety, but he was 230 pounds. I don't know many 230-pound safeties anymore, but he was certainly a top end guy coming out of high school. Visited Alabama just so many times. I think he visited Alabama 3 or 4 times in the spring. Everybody assumed that's where he was going. Took one visit to Texas A&M, and all of a sudden he was Texas A&M bound. It was just kind of crazy. Nobody really expected Texas A&M to be, a real challenger to Alabama at the time. But whenever somebody commits to a school, and if Alabama really wants them, they don't stop recruiting them. They continue to recruit them, continue to show interest, and that's what they did. Really kind of throughout that entire season, and they were able to get him back on campus for an official visit. I believe it was sometime in November, and he ended up flipping to the Crimson Tide. I want to. I could be wrong, but I want to say it may have been it's either for the LSU or for the Auburn game. He took an official visit to Alabama and then flipped maybe a week or two later to Alabama. So obviously, he got thrown in, as you mentioned, he got thrown into the fire right away after the injuries, early in the season, I guess before the season. And, he ends up, having a, outstanding career at Alabama. And, certainly looking forward to seeing, where he ends up going, and certainly looking forward to watching his career in the NFL. But, another great kid from Louisiana that, Alabama was able to sign, develop, and put into the league.
It has just been a factory for Alabama kids that have come from Louisiana. Been fun to watch Christian Harris throughout his time in Alabama. Got to hope for the best. Guys, get in the comments. Let me know where you think these guys are going to get drafted. The first round starts tonight. How many Alabama guys will go in the first round? My take is probably 2 at this point. Would love to see 3. That's probably the guys, though, that we could see going in the first round, maybe even the first and second rounds there. But, a guy like Fidarian Mathis could easily be in this conversation as well. And this is a high personality guy, a guy that, had a lot of fun at his time at Alabama throughout the game of football and dominated, on the field as well. So any stories about Big Phil?
Well, Big Phil, this is probably the only first recruit that I can remember that held his commitment ceremony at a gravesite. Ended up, which was it was different, but it was also pretty cool because he went there to honor his friend who had passed away, and wanted to do it with him. So I thought that was pretty cool, pretty neat. And it ends up committing to Alabama over LSU. Another one of those Louisiana kids that. At the time, people were, especially in the state of Louisiana, not too thrilled that he leaves the state, and he ends up going to Alabama and having an amazing career, permanent team captain, and definitely somebody that I think Alabama fans love, respect, and want nothing but the best for him in the future.
Yeah, incredible impact made by Phil Mathis, getting that invite, to the Senior Bowl all the way through. Just dominance for Big Phil there. But, a guy that was often seen close by, LeBron Ray, a guy that we could see going in these middle rounds as well, maybe into the second round, perhaps. As you look back on his career and kind of reflect on it, what's some fun memories there with LeBron Ray?
Well, I wish LeBron could have stayed healthy throughout his whole career, because I remember seeing him in high school going to a John Clemens game and watching him, or excuse me, James Clemens game, and watching him play and thinking, man, this is this guy has a chance to be an outstanding defensive end for the Crimson Tide. And he was very physical, very athletic, could run, and just had great overall skills as a pass rusher. So, his recruitment wasn't really hard to predict because everybody always felt like he was going to Alabama. Now there were some other schools that were in there, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee. A lot of schools were were trying hard to get him on board, but we always felt like in the end he was going to go to Alabama, and obviously that's where he ended up choosing.
Yeah, no doubt. Wish he could have stayed healthy, like you said. But when we did get to see him, very, very special player. And, I do see him going at least in those middle rounds there. Slade Bolden, former Gatorade Louisiana Player of the Year, a guy, that really got his playing time near the end there and was a big piece of this team in 2022 and, 2021 and throughout his entire career. A guy that maybe didn't get the respect he deserved at times. Where do you see him going tonight? And, reflecting on him as well, just some fun stories looking back on, one of the top players out of the state of Louisiana at the time.
Yeah, he was a exciting high school football player at West Monroe. I mean, one of these kids that played quarterback that ended up making the transition to wide receiver, and that's kind of where he always expected to play. He expected to play wide receiver at Alabama. He ended up choosing Alabama over TCU. I think it was August, right before his senior season started. He was actually recruited by Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll told him, "Hey, I've worked with a lot of guys like you, the New England Patriots. I feel like you can be a perfect slot guy for us in Alabama's system." Who knows? He may end up, playing for Brian Daboll here in the this weekend. You never know. So we'll wait and see what he ends up doing. But man, it'd be pretty crazy if we saw him end up with New England. I mean, that's obviously the spot that everybody keeps predicting him for, but we'll see what ends up happening with Slade. We'll see. Hopefully he gets drafted. I hope he does, but definitely somebody that was better than I expected him to be. Even though he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, thought he had a great career in Tuscaloosa. I mean, you think about all the talent that comes to Alabama, especially at that wide receiver position. A lot of top end guys, and he made an impact. This is a guy who obviously made had a touchdown in the national championship last year against Ohio State, which I think that might have been his first college career touchdown, if I can remember correctly. But man, he was in my opinion, a lot better than everybody expected him to be. And I think he's definitely going to get. I think he's going to get drafted. I'd be surprised if he has to go into free agency. But I think late round he's going to end up getting picked up by somebody.
I do too. And, I believe that he will find a contract if he's not drafted. Like you said, had a great career at Alabama, made an impact and, brought that consistency that core needed at times. One more guy on the offensive side of the football that we hope to get drafted over the next few days, Brian Robinson, a guy that also got the invite to the Senior Bowl, a guy that really waited his turn. We talk about a lot of Alabama guys doing that, but this guy, had to wait in quite the long line there. Got his opportunity this past season, looked steady, looked good at times. Potentially a guy that may not get drafted as well. If you had to talk about where you see him going and, reflecting on his early days, what do you got on Brian Robinson?
Well, first time I ever saw Brian was it was a sophomore year. I went out to Hillcrest and watched him play one night, and man, I sure was impressed. I mean, he was already 6'1", 210, 215 pounds at the time. I wasn't sure how much bigger he was going to get over the course of the next couple of years before he got to Alabama. He always felt like he was going to end up at Alabama. He was an Alabama fan, had an Alabama offer early in the process. So kind of hard to get those guys away from Tuscaloosa if you have that committable offer and you're always wanting to go there. But we've seen so many great backs from Alabama through the years. A lot of different style of backs as well. We used to they all almost the same. You had the Trent Richardsons, the Eddie Lacy's, Mark Ingram, a little smaller than those guys, but everybody was kind of similar. Now you're having all these different types of backs that have come through the program over the course of the last 10 years, and a lot of different styles in the NFL. And this is a big bruising back that can carry the workload, can get you 25, not 25. Well, I was going to say 20 to 25 carries a game if he needs to, but I think he can have success in the NFL. Where he ends up going, no idea. I mean, I would have probably said somewhere like Pittsburgh, but I don't know if he's going to end up at Pittsburgh with Najee there. That'd be a pretty good combination there, though, with Najee and B-Rob. But we'll see what happens. I do think he ends up getting drafted. Just yeah, no idea what's going to end up happening with him this weekend. So we'll see what happens. But I think he's probably a day 3 guy.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Definitely not definitely, but one of the biggest question marks out of these Alabama guys in the NFL draft, like you said, bigger guy, more of a steady running back that's going to be your bull there. Hopefully he does find a team like Slade Bolden and, like a guy we're about to talk about, Jalen Davis. Just 2 players left here on the defensive side of the football, both in the secondary, Josh Jobe and Jalen Davis. These guys, different careers. Jobe, a lot like Christian Harris was kind of thrown into the fire there as well. Jalen Davis to an extent, but both, ending up with excellent careers and guys that I see getting drafted at some point this weekend as well. Looking back on their recruitment and, their careers at Alabama, what are your favorite memories?
Yeah, I thought Jalen could have likely come back for another year. I was a little surprised when he announced. Now I'd heard, I'd say probably a month or 2 prior to him announcing that he was gone, that he was definitely going to leave and go to the NFL. He's got great speed. I mean, this is one of the top, high school football. He was one of the top high school football players in the state of Alabama, coming out of Mobile. I remember he announced a top. I want to say he announced the top 6. It was either February or March of right after his junior season, and Alabama didn't make the cut. Even though I'd heard that Alabama was probably going to have a good chance to get him. Well, took Alabama a little bit. He ends up making it up to Tuscaloosa for a junior day. I believe it was probably sometime in March, and ends up having Alabama. He said Alabama was one of his top schools all of a sudden, and then I think it was sometime in early summer, ends up committing to Alabama. So, that's kind of what I remember about that. It's just a kind of a wild, situation where he had a top 6, didn't have Alabama in it, and then all of a sudden Alabama was the school. I remember kind of the same thing, 8-9 years ago with Rashaan Evans. Rashaan Evans didn't have Alabama in his top group, and then all of a sudden ends up signing with Alabama. So things like that happen all the time. But yeah, I hope to see Jalen do well. But he's got a lot of speed and definitely going to be beneficial to some program wherever he ends up going. Well, yeah, not program, but franchise.
No doubt. He's going to be special. I'm with you. I think he could have, really done himself well by coming back for another year, but got to see him on pro day. Limited at the combine as well. I hope he gets selected at some point in this draft, or at least is able to find a contract after the fact. Josh Jobe, the other member in the secondary, leaving Alabama for the NFL draft, the guy that has had a roller coaster ride of a career just the same, but a guy that looked really steady, throughout these last couple of seasons as he got that experience. As you look back on Josh Jobe, our final NFL draft player tonight, talk about his, your favorite memories of his time at Alabama.
Well, as far as his time at Alabama, I mean, I thought he had a pretty decent career. I thought that he made some big plays, obviously throughout the course of the last couple of years. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, whenever I look at these guys, I always look at their recruitment. I hardly ever remember. I always remember big plays that they make in college, but I always, on draft night, I'm always thinking, 3-4 years ago, I remember this happened, or I remember that happened. This is what happened in their recruiting story. He was a 5-star, maybe he was a 3-star who ended up being, a lot better than everybody predicted him to be. But with Josh Jobe, he was a Miami commitment for the longest time. Originally from South Florida, ends up going up to a prep school, I think in Connecticut, for his senior season. There was always this talk that he was going to flip to Alabama. I mean, it started in the spring before his senior season that he was flipping to Alabama, but it took all the way until November or December before he even flipped his commitment. He ends up taking officials to Alabama, Miami, Michigan, and those were kind of the top 3 schools for him. And obviously he ended up flipping to Alabama where everybody expected him to go. But man, I just remember that whole time just thinking, man, this kid has been committed to Miami for 2 years. Everybody has talked about him flipping to Alabama for 6 months to a year. And is he ever going to do it? And he finally did it. Sometimes those kids don't do it, but we finally saw Josh Jobe flip that commitment to Alabama. flip's going to happen every single year, and that's just part of the whole process.
It definitely is. We talked about some potential flips out of Alabama's class tonight, but as we kind of reflect on everything going on in the world of recruiting and everything going on with this NFL draft as well, just your final thoughts tonight as we wrap it up.
Well, excited to see it. I mean, it's going to be a wild first round. There's a lot of things that are unexpected. A lot of mysteries that are surrounding the draft. Who's going to end up, trading up, trading down. Who's potentially going to get traded. During the night, it's going to be a wild time. But certainly looking forward to seeing what these Alabama guys are going to be able to do. Excited to see who ends up going number one overall. Obviously, it's not just Alabama guys. I mean, I followed so many of these kids' recruitment, so many top guys that went on to other schools and had great careers. So, obviously I'm certainly looking forward to watching, and seeing where those guys go as well. But it should be fun. And obviously on the recruiting front, things are going to continue to stay busy with coaches out on the road visiting top recruits. As I mentioned earlier, Alabama going out to see Brandon Ennis tomorrow, seeing a lot of other top kids, throughout the week and obviously these upcoming weeks as well. So we're going to stay busy on BamaInsider.com. We'll have all the latest scoop on there. So jump on right now. We got an NFL draft thread on the message board that we are posting a lot of content on. So check us out over there right now.
Guys, get in the thread, jump in there, give us your thoughts, and be sure to do so on the comment side of this video as well. And don't forget, for all the latest coverage in Alabama football, you can hit that bell at the top of your page, subscribe to our channel, get those notifications so you can know when we're releasing videos. I know we're going to have a lot of content coming out this week, just kind of breaking down this draft and everything else. And of course, guys, we're going to be here next week to break down the world of recruiting as well. But for Andrew Bone, my name is Trey Yanity, wishing everybody in the NFL draft great luck tonight, and all of you fans, hope you get the player you want. Have a great week, everybody. Roll Tide.